Hi, everyone. This is Erin Shannon with Fem Ideas here today with Caitlin Babcock to talk about the College of New Jersey's Alternative Resolution Program for Sexual Violence, Harassment, and Misconduct. So, Caitlin is the Assistant Director of Sexual Misconduct at the College of New Jersey, otherwise known as TCNJ, in the United States, and she assists in the intake and assessment of reports, coordinates supports and resources, as well as guides students and employees through available institutional processes. Her work centers on ensuring that individuals are informed of their rights, options, and resources while navigating experiences of sexual violence. A central focus of her role is providing trauma informed support to those impacted by sexual violence and assisting them in identifying pathways to accountability and resolution that align with their needs and goals. So today she's going to be discussing TCNJ's alternative resolution process, which is grounded in restorative practices and emphasizes accountability, education, and healing. Thank you so much for being with us today, Caitlin.
Thank you for having me. So I'll quickly go into, so I do have a presentation, so let me quickly get that on the screen. Okay. Hold on. Okay. Perfect. Okay. So today I'm going to be doing a Q&A, but quickly going to go through a couple different things before we get to that portion. So first and foremost, I had a great introduction, so I don't need to go through that all again. But again, my name is Caitlin Babcock. I am the assistant director at a college in the College of New Jersey in the United States. Specifically, we're going to discuss what is restorative justice, what's the alternative resolution process at TCNJ, some challenges we faced, feedback we've received, lessons learned, and advice for implementation. So, first and foremost, what exactly is restorative justice? So, restorative justice is a philosophical approach to wrongdoing that embraces the reparation of harm, healing of trauma, reconciliation of interpersonal conflict, reduction of social inequality, and reintegration of people who have been marginalized and outcast. An RJ approach focuses on who has been harmed, what their needs are, and how the person who harmed them can meet those needs. RJ specifically aims to get an individual who's caused harm to understand the impact of and take responsibility for their actions. So, a really great way that I usually like to talk about RJ is it's an opportunity for there to be education rather than a punitive outcome that can come through the college specifically. So, the creation of our Title IX or our alternative resolution process was created in 2017. So in the United States, we do have a federal law called Title IX, which mandates that institutions that receive any type of federal funding have to respond and address any type of sex discrimination. That is, if you've ever heard of anything in the United States in regards to anything on the basis of sex. Is a great way to look at it. And so, because we already have this federal law that's been in place since 1972, colleges have been addressing certain types of sex-based discrimination, specifically sexual violence, has been something that is a large emphasis currently. And so in 2017, the college was addressing any type of sexual violence that we had on our campus, but recognized that there was a hole that the college was not meeting for our students who were saying that yes, there are punitive options, but for some of us, we really want there to be education. We don't want the person to be kicked out of campus or not be able to continue their education. And so that's where our alternative resolution process began and kind of started, where we were looking into restorative processes. Some of the concerns concerns that, we had, as well as others might have at the time, was thinking that it'd be too formal of an option, right? Where sexual violence is such a serious thing, and so we want to make sure that we're giving it the credence that it deserves. So if we're doing something that's educational, are we not sending a strong enough message? Additionally, we didn't want people to be pressured to participate, right? Education doesn't always happen when someone feels that they're pressured to do something. We were afraid of the risk of further victimization to the person who's been impacted. So that was a really large concern that we had, that there might also be a power imbalance, right? That the person who's making this request may feel that this is the only option because they don't want there to continue to be an issue where there is this imbalance between who's requesting it and who's not, right? Um, and then there's also the concern of a disparity in justice, right? We know that marginalized communities typically do feel underrepresented by justice modules, right? And that we have in the United States and abroad. And so, what kind of disparity could be created in these situations through this process? So these were concerns that we had as well when we were thinking about this. But then we also looked at the positives of what could come out of it. It gave the person who's impacted, we at the college call them reporters, but it gave a reporter a choice and options. It allowed them to have a voice, right? If they did not want to go through a punitive outcome, this was an option that gave them the choice to make this and choose what that education looked like. Right. It also prioritizes healing, right? We're giving the opportunity for that person to decide what is the harm that's been caused and how do you potentially start that healing journey for yourself. It also allowed for there to be accountability that was beyond punishment. And then, of course, it also included, sorry, gotta move my screen a little bit, education and prevention, right? So oftentimes we look at the fact that when there's education of some kind, the hope is that it will stop and prevent it from reoccurring. And so that's the hope here as well through this process, that we don't have someone who then perpetuates again. So what exactly is the alternative resolution? And I think that that's important to kind of have a basis of what TC&J's process looks like. So the alternative resolution is a voluntary process within the college's policy that we have at our institution. It's grounded in restorative practices and allows a respondent in a prohibited conduct case to accept responsibility for their behavior and or the potential harm that's been caused. And then by fully participating in the process, they're not charged with a violation under the policy. So that's that lack of punitive outcome. It is a process that's designed to eliminate whatever the prohibited conduct that has been alleged, prevent the reoccurrence, and remedy any effects that it might have caused, meeting the needs of the reporter and attempting to repair the harm that was caused, while still also maintaining safety overall for our community. So the agreement itself, so the way that we handle our processes is that we give an opportunity for the reporter to meet with us and determine what exactly are the educational activities that you need this person to engage in. And then we work with them to draft, okay, well, what's the harm that's been caused? What exactly are you hoping to get out of this? How does this meet the needs of what's been alleged? And then also just a broader component to it. So as you can see on the left-hand side of the screen, this is actually the verbiage that we have at the beginning of the agreement that is presented to both parties. And this is everything that is required, saying that it's a voluntary process and kind of going through the expectations of this process. This is initialed by both parties so that they're, again, showing that voluntary component. And then on the right-hand side are some of the potential educational activities that an individual could participate in. This is not an exhaustive list because we recognize that every single time someone comes before us, we may have an opportunity to create something new and work to really kind of figure out what they need. So things that we've created at the college are workshops that are specifically geared towards helping individuals gain skill building and understanding of consent, of interactions with others, and things that may fall under that broader scope of sexual violence. Reflection papers and research papers, online modules, if we have them available. We can do restorative circles, which are a little bit more of an in-depth kind of sit down and are more often geared towards though if there are multiple individuals in the community who are impacted, especially if both the reporter and respondent, and the respondent is the person who is alleged to cause harm. If both individuals have caused each other harm, a restorative circle is a really great way for us to kind of come together and restore that harm that might be caused there. Impact statements are a really great way for that reporter to be able to speak to the harm that was caused to them directly using their own words. Sometimes, as we know, alcohol may be involved in interaction. So alcohol education is a really big one. We also have no contact directives, and this is like a no contact order, but basically is a communication where individuals are not to continue any type of verbal, electronic, or third-party communication. And then any type of housing modifications if they live on our campus that we can kind of control the environment that they live in. So again, that's not an exhaustive list. So there's a lot of different ways that we can work with the individual to figure out how can we repair this harm? What exactly do you need that person to hear, see, do to potentially, repair that harm? And then we always end all of our alternative resolution processes with a summative meeting. And this is an opportunity to kind of come full circle, have a conversation about how is this process for you? What do you feel like you gained from it? What are things that may be feedback for us to make this better? For you as a person who's going through it, or someone who is, like handling all of this, what exactly is it that you feel like might be good feedback for our office to be able to implement? So kind of giving us that feedback and active time so we can continue to grow upon the process that we currently have. Um, Additionally, some of the key challenges that we've had, and some of them we still, face as well with this process, is participant readiness and willingness in a voluntary process. At times, students may feel, specifically the respondent, may feel like they're kind of backed into a corner and that they have to do it. And so that's a challenge that we have to always come into this to say, this is a voluntary process. We want you to be willing to do this because it will allow you to, educate yourself on these key areas. Even if a student comes into it as questioning of like, do I really want to do this? We do find by the end of it that they are more receptive and feel like they had some education. So although it is continues to be a challenge of how do we create a voluntary process that doesn't feel like they're being backed into a corner. We find that at the end of it, the feedback that we do receive is that it has been helpful and that they are glad that they went through it. So those kind of components do come into it. Also, managing expectations. A lot of times, our students, specifically reporters, will come into it being like, okay, well, this is going to give me the accountability that I want. And it will give them some accountability, but sometimes they feel like this is going to heal them immediately. And that's not the end goal. And so we have to be kind of transparent about what exactly this looks like. How do we make sure that they're aware of this is really the start of your healing for some of you. This may be the continuation, but it's not the end goal, right? And so how do we then, as an office, also support you to continue that healing journey outside of this process as well? So it's a two-layered component to that. Time and capacity constraints are super important because I have an office of two people. And so, we have a lot of individuals who are requesting our services and needing assistance. And these processes can take time. They can take a lot of administrative burden as well. And so, how are you compartmentalizing and figuring out how do you do this while still being super trauma informed and doing things in a timely manner while also navigating everything else? And so, that's always a constant shifting battle as well. Institutional culture and buy-in. So thankfully, we have a really great institutional culture where they felt that this was really important and have allowed us to continue to work on restorative opportunities at our college, including whether that's having graduate students helping us, whether that is getting people trained at the college to make sure that they know what's restorative. But that has been really great because that buy-in has allowed us to continue to train and educate ourselves to better our processes. Additionally, challenges can be accountability without punishment. So for some of our students, they're like, this is the option that I want. And then sometimes we do receive feedback that, if I really had it, I kind of wish that I had gone this way. And sometimes that's kind of, again, having that expectation of, we hear you and we can only do what you want at that time. And so, how do we make sure that, again, we're communicating what that accountability looks like so that person doesn't have the concern of, oh, I did the wrong thing? Thankfully, we don't have a lot of those. I just met with a student who was really appreciative and felt like this was the right option in the end. But again, we do have those situations where someone might come in and say, oof, I'm not sure. So again, it's really about that communication. And then again, a challenge is assessing your impact and effectiveness, right? Thankfully, we have those summative meetings as well as we have surveys that we send out at the end of the academic year to students to ask, how was their process? How did this work out for you? That allows us to continue to grow on that feedback, but you really have to create those mechanisms to allow for that feedback in that process. So for creating a new alternative resolution process wherever you are, make sure that you continue to have that type of feedback because it's going to be super important to be able to continue and grow whatever you might be offering. So these are a couple of the feedbacks that we've received through the years from individuals who have gone through our process and that have kind of specifically, these are the individuals who are accused. And so this is the feedback that we've received of that it's been really positive, right? That they've learned a lot, that they've grown, but also that it was challenging. If you see the bottom one, this one really kind of hits for me is that the hardest thing to read was her using the word rape. I think she chose that word because of the impact it had on her life. Right, there's this really great self-reflection that our students can go through, and that allows them to understand and kind of potentially put themselves in the shoes of that reporter in some capacity. And the fact that they're able to do that through this process, I think speaks more for the openness and willingness of our students, but also that we have a process that allows them to do that, I think is really, really helpful for our campus specifically. So feel free to read those on your own as well. I won't read them out loud right now. Um, so some of the lessons that we've learned is that one, there needs to be clear expectations, and also making sure that it's trauma informed, right? So again, like I said before, reporters specifically, they may come into this with one idea of what it might look like. And so making sure that you are transparent, being aware of kind of what the expectations of this process, what's going to look like, both time, effort, and what the expectations for that person is going to be so that they can also mentally prepare. Additionally, in that is having strong facilitators. That is really important for this process, that there is that strength because, again, we can go through and create an agreement, but if the facilitator is not strong in it, there's the potential that they could drop the ball and that it's not going to be as impactful as the way that it should be. And so making sure that there is some type of training is going to be really important. Also making sure, another lesson that we've learned is that there is no checklist. As I said, that non-exhaustive list, there's no specific checklist of what this can look like. And so really being open to what options are available while still staying grounded to your values. There may be things that a reporter comes in asking for, and you have to say, I just don't think that that's feasible. We can't implement that. So how do we find another avenue to do that that's not this way? So we at the college cannot mandate someone to go through counseling, but we have opportunities to say, okay, I'm going to do a pick your own adventure. You could do counseling, you could do this, or you could do this. And it allows them to choose so that it's not you have to go through counseling. And so we find back ways to do things that still meet their needs, but also, again, still setting clear expectations of what that looks like and making sure that we're always going to be grounded in that restorative practice. And the last lesson, I would say, or again, these are just three, but we've learned many lessons. But the last is that this process is the start for healing, right? And that this is going to be something that they are going to have to work on outside of this, and that your office, your program can be there to support them and continue to provide resources as they need them. But that healing is something that has to come from that person, and we have to give them the space to potentially start it through our process. But it is not the be all end all. And then just advice that I'd love to make sure that I can give to you is that invest in training from the start. Make sure that your staffing is trained to facilitate, knows exactly what they're doing and how to navigate these situations. And also that they learn that there has to be some flexibility because this is something that things may change and evolve as you go through it. And so having that training and having that mindset is going to be super imperative for your program to be successful and for the impact that you have to be successful. Design it for flexibility, again, kind of working around that. This cannot be just a one size fits all, right? Every single person needs an opportunity to figure out what works for them. And so, it's great to come in and have already created potential workshops and other things, but also in the back of your mind, recognize, are there ways that we can change this to be more flexible to work with this person? Are there ways that we can navigate this that allows for it to be more personalized and individualized to that person to allow there to be better education, right? That flexibility is going to be super imperative. Voluntariness must be real, not symbolic. And the reason I say that is, again, for there to be education, it really does need to be voluntary. If a person feels like this is the only option that they're going into this and this is going to they're not going to take this seriously, then there's not going to be the education that's needed. They could potentially start that way, but again, you really want to kind of flesh out, is this voluntary? Are they doing this for the right reasons? And make sure that there is still some openness to the process. Because as long as there's still some openness, there is the potential that there can be that education. Um, Make sure that you're not just centering a process, but you're also centering support. Because this is a process that feels very administratively burdensome sometimes for a person. And so, again, making sure that you're always checking back with them. What supports do you need? How can I make sure that you're successful? Transparency is going to be super key. Again, you may have all this knowledge of, I think that this works the best. I think that this is helpful. And sometimes it's okay to share that and say, hey, I think that this is going to be really difficult for you. How are we going to navigate this? How are we going to make sure that you are supported, right? And or this isn't maybe not the right option. Let's look at something different, right? Being transparent about what they're sharing with you, but also still trying to make sure that you're not swaying someone in one way or the other. My office specifically has to be neutral, so that's part of that key part. But the transparency can still occur even when you're trying to be neutral. Document thoughtfully. This is really key because this is an educational opportunity. Our office actually limits how much we document. And that is an opportunity for the person to feel a little bit more like they can invest in that education rather than feel like, well, if I say something, it can be used against me. So we really try to make sure that we're documenting everything thoughtfully from what needs to be documented, but also how do we document this so that it doesn't feel like it's a gotcha. If they say, I did this, are we documenting it? And then someone subpoenas our records to then say, let's go criminally, right? And so how do we look at that? That's important. And then again, like I've said before, build an assessment and feedback. It's going to make it so that your process is always evolving, always growing, and is always going to be meeting the needs of the individuals who you're working with. And as that evolves through the years. So. These are just some really great resources that I wanted to share. The sample agreement that we have at the college is actually located on our website. So feel free to navigate our website if you want to learn a little bit more about our process, about our policies, and things of that nature. Feel free to take a look at that. There's also multiple books, but specifically the Little Book of Restorative Justice for Colleges and Universities is really great. We have like a massive stock of them at our college to give out to people so that they are aware of kind of what this looks like. And then there's also training opportunities. One of them that I've done previously was through the University of San Diego that has a really great restorative justice program. So there are a lot of great opportunities out there for you to continue to educate and learn more about this. So thank you again so much. I really do appreciate it. And I will give questions to Erin now.
Thank you so much, Caitlin, for that really comprehensive presentation. I learned a lot and it was really fascinating. So thanks so much. I think the people listening to this will be really, really, will find it super useful in terms of implementing things in their own contexts. Okay, so I have some questions. So, as someone who is familiar with restorative justice, and I think some of our listeners are as well, we may know the answers to this, but I noticed on the agreement that the respondent and the reporter initial at the start, there was a clause that said no mediation will be used for sexual assault. So I was wondering if you could expand on that and then maybe give a brief overview of how you see restorative justice being different from mediation, because I think some people confuse the two of them.
Absolutely. Yeah. So let me start off with why they're different, because I think that that's important. So we see mediation as two parties coming together to talk about issues that they might have, right? They're both coming to the table to mediate a problem. But when we have sexual assaults, it's not two people coming together to mediate it. It's one person who's the victim and one person who's caused the harm, right? And so if we're offering mediation, there's not two parties coming together to talk about an issue. It's one person coming with a problem. And so our thought process is mediation is not offered. We often don't offer mediation, honestly, at the college, partially because students don't usually have two grievances that they want to come together to like have a mediation. But secondary to that, I think a lot of times they don't want to sit down across from the person who's caused them harm. So that's another added layer to all of this is that they're coming together and potentially seeing the person who's caused harm. And that also adds to it. So when we're talking about restorative processes at the college, we're often talking about one person who is harmed and kind of the mediation itself would further exacerbate potential victimization that that person can have. And so, again, trying to stray away from those concerns. That's why we implemented that clause to the agreement. So I hope that answers your questions.
Yes, thank you so much. Yeah, that's very clear and really helpful. Let me see what other questions I had. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about, since you mentioned that institutional buy-in is super important, and it sounds like TCNJ definitely has that for this process. But also time and capacity seems to be really key here. So something like a restorative circle, which you mentioned as an opportunity that students may want to engage in. What was the process like in creating those in terms of capacity building and time resourcing?
So, restorative circles are very lengthy and take a lot of time. And the reason for that is because you have to have meeting upon meeting upon meeting prior to the restorative circle ever happening. And that is to make sure that everyone comes to that restorative circle knowing what that conversation is going to look like, right? And so because of that, that takes a lot of training. And so we've pulled in specifically individuals who have provided training from USC, San Diego. We've also worked with specific just practitioners who are can come in and actually sit us down and say, we're going to do a practice of a restorative circle to make sure that we understand the mechanisms, understand the process. Secondary to that is because there's this buy-in, we also have a lot of individuals at the college who want to participate in these and be facilitators. So not only is our office of two, but there are a plethora of different individuals at the college who are trained to facilitate these. And if they are available and willing, we'll kind of tap into them and say, hey, are you able to do a restorative circle? And so giving them that opportunity to kind of sit down and then really dive into, okay, we're going to start with meetings with all of the parties multiple times to figure out what those problems are that they need to kind of figure out. And then from there, we'll get to a restorative circle. Sometimes those restorative circles don't come to fruition because we're never able to kind of get to that end result. But that again is still part of that process. So it is something that is available. And thankfully, we have people at the college who are willing to volunteer. But it is very time consuming. It takes a lot of resources and again with that buy-in from the institution, we've been able to get those trainings that are necessary. But there's always things that we can continue to grow and learn from.
Great, thanks so much. Um, And yeah, I guess related to that, but more broadly, so not just about restorative circles, but
Mhm.
in terms of time and capacity constraints, can you talk a little bit about what you and your team have done to kind of work around those challenges?
Yeah. Um, I stopped sharing. I figured that was easier. Um, I'm sorry, could you repeat the question again?
Sure. Yeah, yeah. So, in terms of time and capacity restraints in general in mobilizing the alternative resolution process, what are some of the things that you and your team have done to work around those challenges?
Yeah, so I think one of the things that we do is when we do have downtime, we're always thinking about what are, potential projects that we can work on to strengthen and update our processes, whether that is creating, templates of like, okay, so we've got a template that we know we can utilize here and really make individualized as needed. But work around that to kind of figure out, okay, what does this look like so that the when we're in the thick of it and things are really busy, we actually have resources that are available to us. So I think the downtime is really imperative for us, and we've kind of structured our schedule around that. But secondary to that is, communicating what I might need, how, if I've got a lot of on my caseload, I'm going to go to the others who are, who I can lean on and say, hey, how can you help me? What do we look like? And then third, I try to be as transparent with our students as possible. Hey, I would love to get this out to you by the end of the day, but this might be something that gets out to you by the end of the week. And so letting them know, hey, this might take longer than anticipated, and we'll kind of work around that.
Excellent. Yeah, that sounds really, really helpful. I love the idea of a template as something that you can kind of mobilize in the future as
Yes.
well. Um, and I think I just have one more question for you. So you mentioned that the process kind of began in 2017. So we're in its now, I guess, ninth year, which is kind of
Yeah.
wild to think about. So what are some of the changes, if any, that the process has undergone since it was created in 2017?
Well, one, I think that we've continued to get trainings and really like broaden that out. I think we've also looked at the language that we have available to make sure, it's a contract, so it has to have some legalism to it. But are we going to make sure that this is still readable and understandable to the individuals who are impacted? That's kind of been an added component of how it's transitioned. I think the biggest area of transition for us, though, was what we offer. We every single time that we are creating a new agreement, there might be things that are the same as previous agreements, but there also is probably new things. And so we actually add that to a long list of like potential options. And we do have templates that are available on our website that previously weren't. So we try to make sure and prepare our students effectively to say, you know, we're going to have this meeting to talk about what you are going to want and need out of this. But here's some samples of and let us know what kind of speaks to you. What are you like? Ooh, I really like this. So that allows them, previously we're like, just come to a meeting with us and we'll talk to you and we'll try to put something together. But we found that sometimes it's helpful to kind of prepare them a little bit of like, okay, here's what you like, what these options that we've previously offered. Really think about this. Really think about these self-reflective questions and come prepared to answer those. And so that I think has really kind of transitioned us over to, a better understanding of what they need and the process. I also think one of the areas that we are still struggling with is making sure that our students know that it's available. The problem with college campuses is that every 4 years we have a new group of students. And so the knowledge base that they had is now gone, and we now have to reteach every single year. And so we actually do tabling events where we'll sit down with individuals and say, have you heard of the alternative resolution process? What do you think of it? And a lot of times they'll say, I've actually never heard of that. And we're like, ooh, that stinks. And then we'll say, okay, well, let's go through it. What do you think of this process? They go, I really like it. And they're like, okay, would you use it, or would you tell a friend that this is an option that they would use? And 9 out of 10 times they say yes. And so the fact that our students like this option, they know it's available when we talk to them, but we still have to make sure that we're continuing to market because, again, with our population ever changing, we have to continue that marketing all the time. and making sure that our students are aware of it. One of our peer educators on campus this past year came up with a really great idea that alternative resolution ARP looks like ARP, like a seal. And so now our new marketing campaign is the ARP campaign, to have one of our students going around in a seal costume. And I think that that's really genius because hopefully that means that more of our students know, because the more that they know is the more that they're going to report to our office. And I think that's really important because some do not report because they know that there might not be an option available to them of what they need. And I think if they knew that there were these options available and really kind of took it in, then maybe they would be successful, and be able to kind of move forward from that and feel like I can report this. But we know that not everyone, we're not going to reach every single person, but if we can take those opportunities to do that. So I think to answer your question specifically, the transition over the years is really about one, vamping up what we've previously created and really providing those opportunities. And two is finding the ways to market to our campus that really help it stay and that they feel that they understand that it's an option that's available.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for those really thoughtful answers and for sharing so much about TCNJ's alternative resolution process. It was really special for me because I'm an alumna of TCNJ. So this came into being after I graduated, but I'm really proud of the work that you're all doing. And I hope that our listeners will find it super useful. So thank you
Um,
so much.
Thank
Erin,
you. I
can I
really
ask
appreciate it.
a
Oh,
follow-up question, if you don't
yes,
mind?
please.
I've been so thank you, Caitlin. I've taken so much notes. And thank you for being so detailed and being so generous in sharing.
Of course.
But I had a question that I've been thinking about, like, since as you were describing the processes, is that something that we are struggling with definitely in the UK is to kind of, and you said that it was, it's you not only rely on the people in the office, but like the big community which is around, like people who, are again like so generous with their time and they volunteer in these circles. How have you managed to create that community buy-in? Or like build that community base that you can rely on, especially within like this context, like you are again like similar to the UK within a neoliberal marketized university context, and there's constant pushback like politically uh, around the work that we are trying to do. So I'm really 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 interested.
Yeah. So I think one is relationship building. I think that one, relationship building means that when other constituents on campus have activities or other things that you can volunteer your time, that you should do that because then they may be reciprocal in their time. I also think that, creating relationships with individuals to say, this is a really great way to gain knowledge in a different area that, might be helpful for your future career. I think kind of leveraging that is super helpful. Um, but I also think that eh, part of the part of the buy-in as well is saying that when we do this, it helps the larger community. And so that's when you have individuals who go, I want to be there and I want to help people. And I think that, at TCNJ specifically, we really have a lot of people who go into this work because they want to help. They want to, be there and, make sure that our students are successful. And so I think if you can, again, leverage that component of this is why we're here and this is an opportunity to do that, it allows them to kind of say, you know what, actually, I want to do this. I want to gain that experience. I want to understand this. And maybe they do it one time and then they go, I can't do this again. But that's okay because you might have some of those, but you might have some of them go, I would love to keep doing this. This is something that's outside of my wheelhouse, and I would love to keep doing this because I saw the outcome and I saw this, and I see the impact that I had. And so I think that that's been really, really beneficial. But I also know that not, it doesn't work everywhere. And so you may have to figure out what exactly is going to speak to the people that you have in your community that will work for them. Whether that, I'll be honest, there are some institutions that when they have people who volunteer and help with them, they give a stipend. TCNJ does not have that ability to give a stipend. But if your program, your institution has that ability to give a stipend, that's awesome, right? That would be a really great incentive for individuals to want to participate and give their time. But then, because of that, you kind of have to work around how do I really kind of pull the heartstrings a bit? How do I get them this buy-in in some capacity? And it's ever evolving, and it's also opening everything to the community to say who wants to be trained. Because then if you give them the opportunity to be trained, you may find people that you didn't know, that you didn't have connections with, that you can foster those relationships and again continue that cycle of I have people who can facilitate this. I have people who are going to be able to and willing and to help in some capacity. And that's when you then utilize those connections for future when you need them.
Oh my God, thank you so much, Kate. And again, like I think I've have pages and pages of notes, and I'm sure like all our listeners will really appreciate all the advice and the resources that you have shared. And again, like we'll pull out some of the resources that you've shared from your presentation as well. But again, if there are any links to things that you have found helpful, like books or resources, I know you've mentioned some in your presentation already. If you could like put it on the in the chat for us. We can curate that because for every panel, we are putting together a list of resources, which we're going to shortly circulate as well. But thank you so much. I'll let Erin wrap up.
Yeah, just echoing Adrija, really. Thank you so much again for sharing all of that with us. I'm sure people will find it really, really helpful. There seems to be a growing appetite, not only in England, where Adrija and I are based, but elsewhere around the world for finding non-punitive accountability options in universities, specifically in response to forms of sexual harm. So I think that people will really get a lot out of this. And thank you once again for your time.
Yeah, thank you. And again, feel free to reach out if there's any questions or anything else that come up. I'm always happy to respond to an email as need be, or even chat through information as well. So.
Wonderful. Thanks so much.